What's up, everybody? So this is going to be a bit of a ramble on my plans for the Sekhmet Terminator I'm working on, and therefore the several kits I have of those as well. Because I haven't really done too much progress, although I've gotten the goal to the point where I started putting red down for the Tisco Ruby-esque effect of the Thousand Suns Red from the pre-heresy time period. So I have started doing that. I just have to say, as a side note, once you start doing that and getting the red several coats down, it starts coming together real quick and really looking like a Thousand Suns Sekhmet Terminator. Anyways, so that's where I'm at. But it got me thinking, okay, what is my plan? Because yes, I want to get the 30k rulebook to make a proper 30k army list via Forge Rules rules, because I really like that time period. Specifically, I like the concept of Space Marine Legions over chapters. It makes more sense to me. But I still like 40k well enough, and I want to be able to play these guys in a 40k setting, because I don't want to just have these models sitting around for only one type of niche play. You know, it's very much a niche play because not everybody necessarily is going to have a force for 30k. So, with that in mind, I got to thinking about the old Thousand Suns Force I had in the past. I had a pre-Heresy Thousand Suns Force way before Forge World had anything to do with the Horus Heresy time period. And it was done in the traditional red, and it was all kit bashed and converted up. And what I did is I used the Space Marine Codex, playing with Ultramarine special characters, and Grey Knight allies for a Terminator squad to represent the Sekhmet. So I got to thinking about that, and because I have the bulk of my stuff is Sekhmet Terminators that I thought, wouldn't it be fun to play a pure Terminator force with the Sekhmet? Have them, a Dreadnought, a Land Raider set up to help them out, wrecking face, if you will, across the battlefield, or trying to anyway, because it's me rolling the dice. I thought that would be a lot of fun. So I got to thinking, okay, the best way I can represent this to get the best bang for the buck of representing Sekhmet is the Grey Knights. So my plan, 40k style, is to use the Grey Knight Codex, which I don't have yet, because of course when I was looking for the Dark Angel Codex back when that came out, they didn't have it, but they had the Grey Knight Codex. I went the other day looking for the Grey Knight Codex, and they were out of it. So we'll see. They should hopefully get some back in stock. I don't know, but yeah, I will get that Codex, and I will be making use of that to represent the Sekhmet. The reason it works is the Force weapon is now a Nemesis Force weapon in the case of the Kopesh. You know, it works out fine. Just use that as a Nemesis Force weapon. They're all arcane set up anyway. We know about that. So from there, the War Gear works out for the basic Grey Knight Terminator and even basic Grey Knight Paladin. But there is the issue of range weapon upgrade. Sekhmet don't have any. The Grey Knight Terminators do, and I do really like the Psy Cannon. So how can I represent a Psy Cannon on a model but have it usable in both 30k and 40k army lists? So that's what I'm going to be doing. And my thought process for that is to convert up the right arm, because the right arm has the range weapon on the Sekhmet. And as a result, the arm ends at the hand. So I needed to find a hand bit that would work. That has to be a right hand, which is tough. Most of the stuff that would be really good for spell effects is left hands, and I don't need that. I need a right hand, so I gotta figure it out. I haven't really figured out a workaround there yet. But what I'm gonna do, whether it's just painting the hand really glowy or going the extra step and making a spell effect come out of the hand, is I'm going to convert it up so that it looks like it's doing some sort of psyker spell effect, and that would count as the heavy weapon. The key to doing stuff like this is to keep it consistent, and you can do this for power armor guys as well in the Thousand Sun. You know, if you got a tactical Thousand Sun squad and you don't want to have a plasma gun there, you could convert them up to have, let's say, blue energy or blue flames coursing around them to do something. You can do some type of green stuff or some type of spell effect, paint it up all blue-like, and there's your plasma gun. But the key to doing this is to stay consistent. It's a count size, sure, but it's something that as long as you're consistent, nobody can really complain about. You just tell them, look, the model without any ranged weapons, the spell effect is the heavy weapon of the squad. And most people go, hey, that's pretty cool, and be fine with it. Even those who would take issue because they're annoying people to play against in every game, in every store, really, as long as you keep it consistent, don't have much of a case against you. So there you go. So that's my plan. I just got to find a right hand to put in place of the Storm Bolter, or Combi Bolter in this case, and then I'll be fine. Then I'll be usable in both 30k and 40k, no problem. It'll just be an extra little effect that looks neat and is very fitting for the Sekhmet. So, with that said, that's my plan for these guys. Build a traditional 30k force, a more comprehensive, full-on Thousand Sons Legionary force in 30k. But for 40k, I'm going to really kind of keep it armorless side of it anyway. Terminators. There will be, and there is, kind of my own fan head fluff cannon stuff for this force in 40k and why it exists. Because I like doing that. I want to share that to see if I can get anybody to rage in the comments and call me an idiot and this is stupid, because invariably somebody will. So we'll see what happens. But also kind of share my thought process like I just did for the actual collecting side of it. It's also neat and fun to share your thought process behind the other side of it, the fluffy imagination side of it, if you will, because it's always helpful. So feel free to critique it as much as you want. I'm keeping it very basic. I'm not going to get specific. But one of the nice things of 40k is that we have so much leeway in why a force exists where it exists, right? The warp and being trapped in the warp over time in a blink of an eye for the people in the warp can be thousands upon thousands of years outside the warp. So we have a lot of time displacement going on potential. We see it in the Fallen as a good example of how it can work out for you. The Fallen or the Dark Angels. But here we also have fluff that pertains to letting you do what you want. And one of the big things is the fleet of the Thousand Sons was sent away before the sieging of Prospero. There were Astartes in that fleet. In fact, there's a short story about a group on a ship coming back to Prospero and all that, and potentially implying that the Blood Ravens come from this fleet as well, and so forth. So there's a lot of ammo there for your case. For me, though, it's a case of how can I say the Sekhmet are in 40k outside of the Chaos Sekhmet, the Chaos Scarab cult? Well, perhaps Magnus foresaw the damnation that would happen, that would happen to his sons, to his legion, to a degree, and maybe not so much the pure on chaos corruption, but kind of the necessary evil of, going all in with Tzeentch, or whatever the case might be. Whatever Magnus might have glimpsed amongst prophecies and so forth, he sent away his fleet. Now, what is a very good force to have on that fleet? A warband of Sekhmet for leadership and protection and all that. It makes sense to have them. So that's my headcanon reason why there was a secret detachment of Sekhmet up there. And, his most staunchly loyal to the Emperor and all that, those that can lead the fleet in trying times, or at least be there to protect it from any predations while in space, and so forth. Maybe his idea was to have this cradle of fleet ships be the redemption of his legion. I don't know. Make stuff up here. That's what everybody does. So, and it's not official fluff stuff, and there's nothing that really counteracts it hardcore, so it works. From there, the fleet left the system. The fleet, let's say, went into the warp. Well, during the Heresy time period, warp storms were abrupt everywhere. Warp travel was very treacherous and slow going and very dangerous. So perhaps the fleet lost some ships in the process and was scattered and broken apart. And that's where my detachment of Sekhmet gets their origin, if you will, for being a 40k force. They were battling the warp storm while traversing the warp, and they eventually broke into real space at some point post-heresy, close to the 41st millennium, in a very remote region of space somewhere really kind of off the beaten path that, for all intents and purposes, is virtually hidden. It's a remote planet that they translated over with really a very small, forgotten indigenous population of humans, let's say. And here is where that force gets their bearings. The Sekhmet and other support legionary staff converge on a council of the ships that they have remaining to their fleet, or a little sub-fleet, and they start scrying and probing and accessing Vox networks and doing what they can to realize or to figure out what's going on and to realize the gravity of the situation, come to find out that there's thousands of years into the future now. Time has passed. The heresy, well, the Horus heresy happened and is done. And they learn about the Imperium, the state of the Emperor, the creation of this thing called the Inquisition, and to stay away from it. They hear about a whole bunch of Astartes battle force names that they've never heard about before, like the Mortifactors or the Celestial Lions or whomever, right? Angels of Vengeance, forces they've never heard of before, amongst forces that they recognize: Dark Angels, Ultramarines, Space Wolves, and the like. So they kind of learn of this whole chapter formation thing. And they learn of the forces of chaos and their brethren, the Thousand Sons, who have fallen in their eyes to the corruption of the chaos gods, specifically one god, it seems, and how they are a fragment of what they were and basically lost to them. And they take all this with a heavy grain of salt, and they stay isolated, and they basically figure out what to do. And this is where my force comes in as a 40k force. Seeing how the bulk of the traitorous Thousand Sons, as they come to call them, have changed their livery of war and all that, they look at their traditional garb of what the Legion was when they were loyal, and they keep it. This is what loyalty looks like to them, in terms of their Legion. And instead of referring to themselves as Thousand Sons, they'll surely get them killed by this so-called Inquisition and any of the first founding, as they learn that they are, because they may have knowledge of what they are. So they don't call themselves Thousand Sons. They still use the symbol because it's different. It's not really from what they can tell, maybe with a few altercations in the warp with their traitorous brethren, they don't use the same symbol. So the traditional white sunburst symbol stays, but another symbol rises to prominence, the scarab. It's like the two symbols they utilize now, with the scarab having a little bit more of a dominating presence. They are the scarab occult, after all. And basically what we got going on is a warband led by their praetor, whose name is very on the nose, Khepri, which was the ancient Egyptian scarab god. He is marked by his black helmet with gold accenting, and greenish blue robes that he wears. From there, they settle on the planet they translated out of because it was very remote. Nothing really came along this sector. It felt familiar to them, and it was found out the planet was called Kemet. And if you know anything about ancient Egyptian lore and history and all that, before it was known as Egypt, it was called Kemet. So another very on-the-nose thing. And from there, they kind of solidify what they got, maybe cautiously, slowly take in some potential recruits of worth from the planet's very small indigenous population, and strike out against the Xenos and the Heretic, while always keeping a wide berth away from first founding forces and the Inquisition and Space Marines in general. Right? They'll fight alongside an Astra Militarum force, what have you. They don't care. They don't have to identify themselves and what they're called. But alongside fellow Astartes, they get paranoid, especially if they are of the first founding. And the Inquisition is always suspecting everything, so they try and stay away from it. And they got two things going for them. Firstly, changing their way that they refer to themselves no longer as Thousand Sons, but as the Order of the Winged Sun, referencing their winged scarab symbol. Secondly, the situation at hand in 40k, which is the warp rift across the galaxy, widespread panic, chaos, and battle. This random force, ruby-clad force out of nowhere with some arcane capability taking the fight to the enemy and persecuting the Xenos and the Heretic alike is not going to get as much attention in such a turbulent time period. So that's my setup. Thanks very much for sticking through this long ramble. I know I talk too much, but it's what I do here. It's part of this channel's shtick, if you will. But that's my setup, both on the collecting side and a little bit of into the fluff headcanon of how this force exists in 40k, because it's fun to do that. Thanks very much for taking your time to listen. Leave any question, comments, or requests in the comment section. And until next time, take it easy.